This is Mark Zuckerberg. He is considered the most dangerous man in the world. One day, in April 2021, the most dangerous man in the world received a shock. In iOS version 14.5, Apple released a feature called App Tracking Transparency. Accordingly, apps will have to ask users for permission before accessing the random advertising identifier on iPhones, called IDFA. So now Facebook can no longer easily access users' personal data as before. It soon cost Facebook billions of dollars, and Zuckerberg became less dangerous. That is the kind of power Apple had since the release of the first iPhone.
I think we have a very clear target on where we're going in that regards, and we think profitability is very, very important.
In 1997, Steve Jobs returned to save an Apple that was on the brink of bankruptcy. He then led the company to a remarkable recovery, starting with the launch of the iPod in 2001. After that, the iPod continued to achieve enormous success, but the problems also began around this time. Millions of Americans already had mobile phones to make calls, and now they had to carry an additional music player. In 2003, consumers went crazy for the Palm One Trio 600, a product that combined a phone and a PDA. With phones about to support 3G and Wi-Fi, memory costs dropping, and digital music services emerging rapidly, the demand for an all-in-one phone was huge. Jobs understood that such devices would directly threaten the iPod, and Apple was starting to rely heavily on the iPod. Thus, they had to venture into the mobile phone market. But carriers like Singular or AT&T were the ones shaping mobile phones at the time. They had full control over which features could be added to phones. BlackBerries and Nokias couldn't have full web browsers. Instead, they were seen as devices for users to sign up for carrier contracts. Steve Jobs wasn't willing to accept that. In the summer of 2004, Apple partnered with Motorola to develop a phone called the Roker. Apple would bring iTunes to the Roker, but the Roker soon ran into problems. In September 2005, Jobs said the Roker was an iPod shuffle on your phone. Jobs knew he was holding a failed product. The Roker was slow, couldn't download music on its own, and could only store 100 songs. Motorola and Apple parted ways. However, the Roker helped Steve Jobs realize that Apple needed to create its own phone. Jobs then met with Stan Sigman, CEO of Singular, and declared that Apple could create a revolutionary phone. Sigman believed him. In 2005, profits from voice and SMS services were steadily declining due to price wars. Sigman understood that Singular needed to find a competitive advantage with an exclusive phone that everyone would want. A phone like that could steer users toward web browsing instead of making calls. It could help Singular increase revenue from internet charges. The issue was, for years, carriers like Singular and Verizon controlled the sale of content to users, from ringtones to Java apps. If Apple was allowed to develop its own mobile operating system, content revenue would fall into Apple's hands instead of the carriers. But Sigman had no better choice. The first iPhone was launched in January 2007.
iPhone. Today.
Although the first iPhone had many flaws, no 3G, no video recording, and not even copy-paste. Despite this, it completely changed the traditional telecommunications model. By this time, Singular had merged with AT&T and exclusively sold the first iPhone. All of their competitors now had to rush to find a touchscreen phone that could compete directly with the iPhone. Verizon, which had previously declined Jobs' offer for the iPhone, now frantically demanded BlackBerry to create an iPhone killer. Thus, the BlackBerry Storm was born, and from here, storms began to fall on both BlackBerry and Verizon. The return rate for the Storm was 100%. Verizon, the exclusive distributor of the Storm, had to absorb a loss of up to $500 million USD. But competitors to the iPhone soon emerged. When the iPhone launched, Andy Rubin and Google completely scrapped the Android HTC Sooner project. which had originally been created to compete with BlackBerry. Instead, the project was shifted to develop Android on the HTC Dream to compete with the iPhone. Later, in 2019, Verizon made a comeback with the Motorola Droid 1, which generated $1.5 million in sales in just 74 days on the market. This success, along with the later Samsung Galaxy S models, was partly driven by carriers seeking to break AT&T's dominance. This momentum created a race between Android phone manufacturers and Apple to continuously improve features and specifications. And so the iPhone, born in 2007, unlocked the potential for the mobile phone industry. From this point, manufacturers could freely innovate to compete. After hardware came software. In July 2008, the App Store was launched. Within a year, the number of app downloads for the iPhone had reached 100 million. Mobile apps had become a gold mine worth billions of dollars, turning app developers into new power players. The App Store and Play Store have now become central to the digital lifestyle, and telecom providers must keep upgrading their infrastructure to meet users' data demands. The iPhone changed the power dynamics for carriers and also shifted the power among the largest phone manufacturers in the world at the time. Have you ever used a phone from Samsung, BlackBerry, Nokia, Sony, Huawei? Do you remember the last time you saw phones with countless designs? Have phone designs ever been more boring than they are now? From hundreds of different phone models, there's now only one familiar rectangular design. A few small innovations, like Samsung's Fold or Flip, aren't enough to change this monotony. But if phone companies don't follow this trend, they could disappear. Nowadays, every time a new iPhone comes out, it's always accompanied by complaints about how expensive it is or how there aren't many upgrades from the previous generation. But it's been criticized ever since it first appeared in the world. Back then, no one believed in a phone without a keyboard, when the world was filled with BlackBerry, Moto Q, Palm Trio, and Nokia E62. Ed Zander, then CEO of Motorola, when asked what he planned to do about the iPhone, responded, "You should be asking how they're going to deal with us." Olli-Pekka Kallasvuo, CEO of Nokia, said, "I don't think anything from Apple will make us change our product strategy, software, or business methods." Ed Colligan, then CEO of Palm, said, "We've spent years learning and struggling to figure out how to make a proper phone. Those who only make computers can't do it." John Rubinstein, former CEO of Palm, even made this comparison. Can a toaster make coffee? There's no way such a device can exist because it can't do better than a dedicated toaster or coffee machine. Steve Ballmer, CEO of Microsoft, even laughed.
All that.
$500 fully subsidized with a plan? I said, that is the most expensive phone in the world.
In 2010, when launching Windows Phone 7, Microsoft even held a funeral for the iPhone. But then, Microsoft came to its senses, laid Windows Phone to rest, and advised users to go back to iOS and Android. Those jeers and laughter helped nurture the iPhone, making it grow and generate enormous profits for Apple. Meanwhile, Palm, Motorola, Nokia, and BlackBerry have become fond memories of someone's youth, or were revived reluctantly. The iPhone, however, remains a key player in bringing massive profits to Apple. Records keep being broken. $1 trillion, $2 trillion, and then $3 trillion. And this growth shows no signs of stopping. Along with vast amounts of money comes immense power. An iPhone is made up of many small parts. Each of these small parts shows how powerful Apple has become. They can bring or take away contracts worth hundreds of millions of dollars, even from names that represent Android, Qualcomm, or Samsung, for example. On April 16, 2019, Apple and Qualcomm officially ended their 2-year legal battle, and Apple unexpectedly signed a cooperation agreement with Qualcomm. Qualcomm stock surged 23% to 70.45 cents, the largest increase in more than 19 years. Similarly, Samsung, Apple's main competitor in the high-end phone segment, also benefits as iPhones bring significant revenue for Samsung's display panel division. Meanwhile, GT Advanced went bankrupt when Apple decided not to use sapphire screens for the iPhone 6 in 2014. InvenSense had to sell itself in 2017 for less than half its value from 3 years earlier, after Apple started designing its own motion chips for the iPhone X. Conversely, when there was news that Apple might switch to using LCD screens from Japan Display for the iPhone XR, the company's stock immediately rose 12%. Even in the US, iPhones sell like hotcakes, but Mac sales aren't as high, so Apple requires retailers that want the latest iPhones to also carry Macs, iPads, and AirPods. Apple's hardware power is substantial, but its software power is no less impressive. Apple's control over the App Store has caused headaches for companies like Meta, Spotify, and Epic. Over the years, the world has changed a lot, but the iPhone remains the most beloved phone. Today, scenes like this are all too familiar. Once you've come to love the iPhone, love iOS, and are bound within Apple's ecosystem, it's hard to switch to another operating system. So you'll accept whatever Apple provides for a new iPhone, whether you like it or not. For instance, they can take away your headphones and charger under the guise of environmental protection. That's the power Apple holds over its users. People love the iPhone for many reasons: beautiful design, smooth operating system, ease of use, and especially its high level of security. In 2016, when a U.S. federal court asked Apple to help the FBI unlock an iPhone used by a participant in the San Bernardino shooting in California in December 2015, which left 14 people dead and 22 injured, Apple refused this request. Not just once.
If Apple's right, and if this technology ends up getting disclosed, then their privacy and all the information on their iPhone could be at risk. You could be at risk for losing your personal privacy on your medical information, on your banking information. Even your bank security may be at risk.
In fact, since the time Steve Jobs was still alive, he had always emphasized privacy for Apple users. And Jobs truly made the efforts to do so. Now it's Tim Cook's turn. But Tim Cook is much more flexible. Tim Cook has criticized social networks like Facebook and Twitter for trying to exploit users' personal data. He walks the talk, and in April 2021, Apple made privacy changes on the iOS operating system. Whenever an app is opened, users would see a pop-up window asking for permission to track them for advertising purposes. They can easily decline by tapping the Ask App Not to Track button. Previously, by tracking the IDFA on apps in iOS, Facebook, Google, or websites, advertisers could know users' shopping habits and preferences, and from there, create targeted ad campaigns and measure the success of those campaigns. But now, with ATT, that spring has ended. Very quickly, ATT caused Facebook and many other companies to lose billions of dollars. The ad measurement company AppsFlyer reported in October 2021 that 86% of iOS devices are running with ATT enabled. Only 38% of users agreed to be tracked, while 62% hit the decline button. Apple's refusal to help the FBI or its ATT feature has earned much user trust. But that's not the case everywhere. Take China, for example. In 2017, China enacted a cybersecurity law requiring foreign companies to store Chinese users' data within the country. To appease China, Apple stored the data of Chinese users at a data center in Guizhou province. Chinese government officials would control this center, including having the key to unlock the data. If Apple wants to continue thriving in China, it must become a tool of government censorship. Of course, Apple has many reasons to fear China. First, the majority of Apple's products are assembled in China. Even a small mishap could severely disrupt the supply chain and bring Apple to its knees. Second, the Chinese market is too large for Apple to take a hard stance. It brings in 1/5 of Apple's sales revenue. Fluctuations in China always make Apple nervous. For example, the ban on using iPhones in some government agencies wiped $200 billion off Apple's value in just 2 days. Moreover, new regulations that could cause popular apps like Facebook, Instagram, X, and WhatsApp to disappear from the Chinese App Store. If not careful, Apple could lose tens of billions of dollars from the App Store, as well as countless users to Xiaomi or Huawei. Apple doesn't fear the FBI or Zuckerberg, but it must fear China. And it's not just Apple. Tesla and Facebook are in the same boat. Zuckerberg even had to come here to exercise. And now, Apple must also fear the EU. The European Union's passage of the Digital Markets Act, aimed at increasing competition and ensuring user choice, will surely limit Apple's power in the future. First, the iPhone 15 had to switch entirely to the Type-C port instead of the proprietary Lightning port. Next, it could be iMessage or the App Store's turn. Steve Jobs created Apple's power by launching the iPhone, and now Tim Cook, with that power already in his hands, just needs to use it flexibly. And let's hope the US and China don't clash.